I was touring a lot around Australia in this big bus that you see here, my Freedom bus. Saoirse, that's what I should have named her. Instead, the kids ended up naming it. It's Busty Bertha Bell, because it has to have three names to 3 kids, and they couldn't agree on one, you know. Yeah, I was touring a lot around. We were living on the road full-time in the bus here, but every time we come through Bundjalung country, which is where we are here, I'd always leave kind of weeks on the tour diary either side to spend time here, because I just felt, yeah, a really deep and beautiful connection to this space in all of Australia. I just found it to be very open, and also that culture here was being preserved. And in Australia, at times, especially like in the suburban life, you don't see, unless you search for it, you don't see the evidence, I suppose, of Indigenous culture on the land, because it's been so colonized and taken away or stripped away in different ways. So, but being up here, I felt it, and lucky to have been on a festival with the Banyara Culture Collective, and just really connected in with the women there, and then just speaking with Delta, I suppose, over different events that we were both part of, and different things that I was asked to sing at for them, and just being able to recognize. I think one of my first few times playing on bills with other Indigenous artists, because I found that I'm kind of on the fringes here. It's a bit of my life story, really, because I'm not an Australian, you know. And so when I was playing at festivals or touring or something, I kind of was on the fringes of the Australian music industry, because I'm not like one of their own that they're promoting and looking after. But on the fringes, you find the really deadly people. That's the other thing, Indigenous culture, they say deadly over here, so we love that too.
Wow. She feels like she's on the fringes. Well, Black people do here. You know, we are on the fringes. We don't have that voice, that platform. And I suppose that's another reason why we connected, because you felt that way and I feel that way. So we're going to raise our voice to say, hey, here we are. We are powerful. We're here in Mullumbimby, or Mullumbimby, little hill. I left high school in year 10, so I was 16 and didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I was going to be good with working with children, because I had so many kids in my family that I was great with. So off I went to Melbourne to do an Aboriginal childcare course, because I thought I need to get, you know, that white man's piece of paper to come home and be able to get a job here. I went to Melbourne, and after growing up in Byron Bay, being the only family and just, you know, having no voice here, I went to Melbourne and everyone's wearing this symbol. Everyone's got their hand in the air, marching for land rights.
We tell them what that symbol is, because a lot of them won't know.
This is the Aboriginal flag. Yellow for the sun, red for the land, and black for the people. So for me, coming from Byron Bay, a little one-horse town with no voice, I went down there and I was full of Black people wearing this powerful symbol with their hand in the air. So it was a huge learning curve for me, and I fell in love with Melbourne and the Aboriginal community, because Aboriginal people come from all over the country to cities to make a living. And a lot of those people were Irish and Greek, you know, all the people living on the fringes. So that's where I got my political, learning from. So I come home 18 years ago and I haven't stopped, because coming from a city and then coming to my hometown, it was like going back 20 years. And again, it's like, wow, still no voice for Aboriginal people in my traditional homelands. So it's been wonderful to use festivals as that platform to get our really important messages out there, that We're still here, we're looking after country, and we want to have a say over our country, our way of life. And we want respect. Currently, I do cultural tours, so it's a wonderful way for me to, teach people how Aboriginal people walk softly on the land, how we look after the land through sustainability and ensuring that we've always got that crop of food by not taking too much, not being greedy, and ensuring that we always plant our seeds, spitting out those seeds as we're walking along our ancient walkways, and also through totemism, having animals and birds or plants that are our totems that we don't eat, that we must look after. So I suppose, I say to people, Aboriginal people, we're the first greenies. Sustainability for us is a way of life. Growing up as a kid, the elders are always guiding you in those principles of looking after country. And just like you, those seasons are so important. And, with me and Áine, when we do go through our seasons, we're always teaching each other about that, and sharing those similarities is pretty exciting, besides the word deadly.
Yeah, I was showing her the Bridget's cross and explaining Bridget's day to her. And then she's got some of her weaving there.
Wow.
So it's lovely, like even just this, like when I get to sit with the women and weave, it's just, to me, touches back into our indigeneity from being from Ireland. And it's lovely, to have, like for both of us, we've found to be able to share those things, because it strengthens and excites you about, you're like, oh, we have something like that. Or, she'll tell me a story and I'll be like, whoa.
Gosh, in the Bundjalung Nation, which, if you drove north a couple of hours and then west 3 hours and then south, a couple of hours, within that large area, before Europeans arrived, we had, up to 20 different dialects just in that area, which is massive. Our dialect here is a Imbolc dialect, and my mother wasn't allowed to speak language. Her mother wasn't allowed to speak language. It was all, suppressed. So I'm, when I turned 50, that was a really big part of me that wanted to learn. So, 50 years old and learning my mother tongue. It just makes me cry. Sometimes in class I'd have to stop myself from crying, just thinking, my old people weren't allowed to talk it. Yeah.
Wow.
I find that we're so blessed in Ireland, even though we've lost it. We have radio stations, a TV station, there's a living, there's documentation in that. And when I see Delta and all over people fighting for their languages back after 2 generations of it not being allowed, like the resources as well aren't there. And that's, they're trying to piece together from whatever elders are still living. They're trying to piece together these languages now. And, in a way, we're so blessed in Ireland, even though it's considered a dying language.
All our dances about paying respects to the ancestors, to our land, to our people. So a lot of our dances are the movements from stories and our animals and our heroines that look after country and the dreaming. So, it's totally connected to everything that we live and breathe and eat, which is our culture. And again, I didn't start dancing till I was 40 years old. I've never seen, people dance in my traditional homelands. It's another thing that's been revived, which is really exciting.
When I first moved to Australia, I suppose, like, you don't exactly see it first, and you're looking for because we have a strong sense of culture in Ireland, I was looking for where the culture was. And like I said at the start, it's pushed out. So you do have to search for it. And my first 2 years here, I was really unsettled. And it wasn't until I started working, I was randomly put on a bill with another Indigenous artist, Arakwal, and he started singing in language and speaking about land and country and home. And you want to say goosebumps. I was like, I had to sing after him, and I was like in the audience, just like drowning in tears and just, he's a powerful singer, hey?
He's deadly.
But it was just one of these incredible moments where I was like, oh, it's here. There's culture here and it's alive. It's just oppressed, suppressed, and it's pushed down. And, I think what's drawn me to the space of using my platform to speak about it is that there are not enough white people in this country that are recognizing the truths that Delta was speaking about earlier, the trauma that still exists, the deaths in custody, the children that are still being taken away from families, the structures that created, her family not being able to speak their native tongue still exist here and are still actively trying to strip Indigenous culture of what they have left, which is, they're only 3% of this population in Australia, which is mind-boggling, because when colonization came, there would have been more Indigenous people here than what's here now. And that's through genocide. And there is modern genocide still occurring in this country, and it's really hard to walk on this land, I find, as an Irish woman, without recognizing that and without, like my first 2 years here, I was like, I don't understand this place. It was just all, and then I was like, oh, whoa, all right. What happened to us? That's still happening here daily. Well, it's really interesting because the Irish diaspora here, let's say, not the ones, like there's a lot that came out at the time of the global financial crisis, which is when I came. So there's a young native Irish people that are here. But if we talk about the Irish people that have been here for a few generations, what I have found is they forgot who they are, they forgot where they came from, because that is the design of the colony. And in that, there's a choice. You either become the oppressor or you buck against the system. And, even in my own journey in music and everything, I've had to be like, no, I'm not gonna shut up and be quiet. You're not getting that from me. But it's hard to do that. So generations on, you see the white trauma that exists here, and a lot of that will be in the Irish population. And the Irish and the Indigenous were very connected when we arrived, because we were the bottom of the chain, along with how the Indigenous were treated here. So you have this intergenerational trauma that exists from the Irish, from what happened to them in Ireland to get them here, and then what's happened here on top of that. And I think that there is a massive awakening that needs to happen within white Australia. Even those that have come from English background or Scottish, there's a trauma in them that needs to be dealt with, and you react out of fear when you don't deal with your trauma. And it's kind of like the entire nation has different layers of trauma from being either the colonizer or the colonized at various stages of their journey here.
Growing up, I would never talk about our culture and, having a wonderful weekend with all our aunties and uncles and sitting around the campfire and eating mud crabs and prawns and fish and, all amazing things we do with our old people. Today, the education system, in the curriculum, you must have Aboriginal culture. It's a total big change, and working with schools has just been a joy, because at the end of a session with a group of kids, I'll have them cuddle me around the legs and go, I wish I was an Aborigine Auntie Delta, or wish I was Bundjalung. So it's pretty cute. Or a parent might come up in the street and say, oh, my child loved being with you and came home and hasn't shut up about you, and now she believes she's Bundjalung. She wants to be Bundjalung. So you're like, total change that Aboriginal culture is valued and respected in schools. And now that we've had this huge revival of language, there's so much need in schools, but not enough language speakers to go in there and teach Bundjalung. So massive, massive changes in the school system. But outside the school system, I just get sick of constantly having to educate. It's like Áine, you're constantly educating people, or pulling people up with cultural appropriation is a huge thing where we live here. They're grabbing some Irish culture and Aboriginal culture and American Indian culture, and they're mishmashing it and doing their own little ceremonies of weird, wonderful, fluffy things. So it's interesting what's going on. Today, my elders have, fought for over 20 years to prove their descent and connection here in the Byron Bay area. And in 2019, we were finally, after 20 years, awarded our native title, our rights.
Maybe just explain, native title is this really white way to
prove your descent and connection before Europeans came here. Yeah. Now, looking at Australia's history of, disease and massacres and the stolen generation, they've gone to great lengths to sever that tie with country for Aboriginal people. And it's a really hard thing to do. And that's why it took us 20 years to prove our descent and connection to our country. So that's, my old people, the last surviving elders out of the 13 were women.
She comes from a long line of strong women there, the 4, but it's because of her mum that they were able to claim native title, and the trauma that came from that is what actually gave them the title in the end. Do you want to tell them just about the mission?
Yeah, so you would have heard about the missions, where Aboriginal people, another way of, breaking down our culture, was rounding up Aboriginal people and putting them on these missions. And on the missions, you cannot leave, because they'll have a station master looking after Aboriginal people's welfare. And on these missions, you'd have to wake up, shine your shoes, make your beds, do all those things. Once a week, the mission manager's wife, she'd come around and make sure, she'd check your cupboards, check that your house is clean, because if you didn't have food in the cupboard and your house wasn't clean, then your children were taken away.
As much as travelling around here, I've noticed the things that really jar and hurt when you see these things. The resilience of Indigenous people here is incredible and powerful, and Delta is a living example of resilience passed down through the lines. And there's so many incredible people that you're just like, whoa.
And I think that's because of, laughter and love and always having a joke.
Yeah, mucking around by the fire.
That's how we get over it when we're having really bad times, don't we, Áine? Yeah. We have a positive future because both, black and white here are learning through the school system the truth of Australia's ugly history.
Because the school system, bits of our history in Ireland when we weren't in control of our school system, what that does is that you have generations of white people here and Indigenous people that have learnt, they only stopped singing God Save the Queen when, a couple of years back.
Yeah. Our history has just been whitewashed with, I went to primary school, in the 70s, and we'd children, turn to page 59. We're going to learn about Australia's history. And that was all about Captain Cook. Captain Cook discovered Australia. Yeah.
Wow.
So like that truth.
Yeah.
And the books would have all these awful pictures or sketches or drawings of, the British landing with their British flag in the sand, and all these savage pictures of the Aborigines dying, and it's awful growing up with that, like sitting in class, the only Aboriginal kid, knowing this isn't right, but having no voice to argue with an adult, and then going home and telling my mother, we learn about Captain Cook, and then my mother's gone off swearing all these profanities. Children now are learning about stolen generation. They're learning about the yes vote in 1967. They're learning about all these Aboriginal resistance, the frontier wars, the truth of it all. It's going to be a new future. And
the 1967 Flora and Fauna Act, like it still is affecting people today. Like it's not like it stopped and then it doesn't have an ongoing effect. One of our sisters, Emily Waramara, a singer that I work with quite a lot, she was coming over to Ireland with me last time I was home. I don't know if it's last year or the year before now. I've really lost track of years with this COVID thing. And her flights, she had a house fire, and her mum both lived in the same house, and they lost all their documentation, so passports, all this stuff, which in any bureaucracy is hard to replace. So for them to have their indigeneity on that, they had to then go back and claim basically native title to who they are, and they're from a very remote island up the north part of Australia, Groy Island. And so they had to get the grandmother's information to be able to get the mother's information, then to get Emily's information. And it got delayed, and she ended up missing 3 or 4 of the tour dates at the start, because the grandmother was, and it makes me emotional even thinking about it, she was classified as a monkey on her birth certificate. And for that, Emily is a 25-year-old young woman trying to empower herself, touring around the world, and she gets stopped by that. Like that act still is in the DNA right now, and it's in trauma that is re-traumatizing
definitely.
All the time. When you try to heal something, there's something else that comes, that's, we're all walking around as these in colonization. That's what decolonizing to me means, is dealing with your trauma, your generational, your personal trauma. And if each of us did that process, we would be in a very different place of listening to other people's perspectives and experiences, lived experiences, past experiences,